Colin, welcome to the AI 360 podcast. Super excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too. So, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about your role and what you're up to?
Yeah, thanks for the time, first of all. Khalid Behairy, and my role within Deloitte Consulting is I lead our AI practice, and I specifically focus on power utilities and renewables. So I'm at the intersection of where our power utilities and renewables industry meets our AI capability. So, I get an opportunity here, and very fortunate that I work with clients really in this very asset intensive space, where we talk about AI. We look at how AI could impact, the business. We talk about strategies and how AI strategies can support the transformation. And what's fascinating here is that discussion spans from the boardroom all the way through, into the field, and working with the workers in the field, and seeing how AI could impact how they do work.
Well, that's great. And so, maybe give us a little bit of a history lesson because AI is not a brand new thing. So, it's been around a little bit in the PU and R space, I would think, for a while. Like, how have things progressed, maybe in the last couple of years, in terms of what you're seeing clients be able to do now with the AI capabilities that are out there?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing in this space is that, the environment around us is really changing dramatically, and it's placing demands on power and utility customers. And I'll give you an example. Companies. I'll give you an example. There's a tremendous increase on demand for the grid due to electrification. And also, which is ironic here, is that due to, the need to power AI, that is adding demand on the grid. There's also, increased need for reliability and for resilience on the grid. There's increased demand from regulators and expectations from regulators and from consumers. So really, utilities are under a lot of pressure to solve these problems. And these are problems that need solutions at scale. That's the key thing. You can't only, work on small, around the edges type of solutions. You need solutions that are transformative. You need them that really can only be solved with technology. So what we find is that innovation in our case is not to be second tier. It is, and this is really by and large why we focus on this space. We work with clients on innovation, how innovation and AI can be applied to the business, and we look for not just incremental transformation, but major transformation. So, that is what we have been seeing evolve. And the interesting thing is, more and more now we hear about value, and the conversation is around value, and not just value and what value can we get, but speed to value as well. And this is what we're seeing the industry move in that direction.
That's really helpful. And I think this idea of scaling and speed to value is just so important. We see that from all of our industries, really, that there's not a lot of patience for organizations to wait for ROI. And so they're expecting people to innovate and the organization to innovate kind of at this pace of AI that's happening in the
Yeah.
marketplace. Maybe you could take us through an example or two of like how these clients are really thinking through these scaled use cases. If you can share like a couple examples or really good one about kind of where are you seeing this happen?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, if you given the nature of how asset intensive power and utility companies are, what we have, on the ground is that, there are hundreds of thousands of objects and devices that are out there in the field and in the control rooms. And what needs to happen is the way to transform this is by pairing workers with technology to give them the opportunity to make better insights and to extract insights from these objects that are out in the field. So, there's got to be AI at the edge, and not just at the edge, but in every aspect in the process, end to end. And to be able to scale and transform is how we're gonna achieve the results. So where we're seeing the transformation happen and where we're seeing AI being applied are in four segments. It is in grid operations, in the field, in field operations, whether we're doing asset inspection, whether we're doing vegetation management, whether we're doing predictive and preventative maintenance. It's also for customer experience. And very importantly as well, it's in the back office. So those are four areas that we're seeing AI being applied, and where you can get a lot of value.
Khalid, that's great. Really interesting to see what you're hearing in terms of how things are fitting out in the field, in terms of access to these tools, access to AI at the edge. Are small language models coming into play as you think about this too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a need for large language models as well as small language models. And also what we're seeing more and more is a focus and emphasis on knowledge management as well. How are we extracting that knowledge from documentation that exists in the hands of field workers? It exists in, process documentation and regulatory filings. Extracting knowledge from all of those is something that we're seeing utilities are leveraging more and more as they look at optimizing these processes.
Well, and you hit on this too. It's sort of the idea of the humans plus machines making those workers more effective in the field. I think it's really interesting too. It's kind of humans times machines, right? It's sort of like how do you 10x the humans that are out there trying to get
Yes.
this work done at the edge or wherever their job takes them, which is great to see in the industry. It's really exciting. Um, Maybe one other question for you, called on this, is that as you think about this industry, I think of some legacy systems that are probably in place, some legacy processes. How are you helping them think through kind of the reimagination of some of these systems and processes that are maybe been around for a really long time?
Yeah, I mean, there is tremendous amount of complexity in the processes that utility companies have to deal with. And, the thing is, they're not just in the fact that they are complex, but also if something goes wrong, the results can be bad. I mean, we're talking about safety and the well-being of customers in the community as well as workers in the field. So, I mean, if you look at an example in our space like vegetation management, right? The utilities are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to inspect vegetation and really looking at, hey, does this branch encroach on a line? And or looking at assets that are in the field and identifying if there is a defect, or trying to identify if a line is down. Now, some of these things sound to be simple, but how do we scale that with technology? And if we don't scale it with technology, then the results can be catastrophic. So we're looking at ways where we could start to introduce satellites and drones into this so that we can go through the process a lot more in a lot more streamlined fashion. And furthermore, maybe even do it in an autonomous fashion, not just having, by really enabling workers to leverage the technology to its maximum potential. So, a lot of these complex processes reside in grid operations and reside in field operations. And we're looking at, we implement technologies that are allowing us to take those capabilities and really allow us to solve the problem and to really extract a great deal of value from it.
It's really helpful. Maybe just to wrap it up, Claude, what do you think is like the one piece of advice you want people to take away, from our conversations or where the direction of this market's headed with AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think a key thing, Jim, is that we need to look at transforming processes, not just looking at use cases, but looking at processes end to end. If you want value and you want speed to value, it really needs to look at an end to end process. So, leveraging agents, leveraging AI agents has the potentially of revolutionizing how work is getting done. And if you look at the field or grid or back office processes, it's not just about using AI to identify if there's a defect in an asset, for example, or it's not just about how to execute a certain back office function. It's about how do I inject AI into an entire workflow so that it does everything. It does the scheduling, it does the planning, and it's not just one use case, but it's an entire process transformation. So when we look at agentic AI, you know, process workflow is the future to solve some of these problems.
I love it. And we almost made it through a whole podcast, call it, without mentioning agentic AI, but you did it anyways, which I love. Thanks, man, for your time. I really appreciate it. It's a great conversation.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Take care, everyone.